Hey, what's up and how's it going? This is Toby, and in today's video we're going to build this amazing 3D placement filter in Lens Studio for Snapchat. And as you can see, we can just tap on the screen and place this scary looking flesh-eating plants. And this kind of project is a great starting point to build a more complex filter, maybe a mini game or some fun interaction. We could add some animation here, or maybe require the user to fight against this flesh-eating plant, or whatever else you can think of, so there are no borders for your imagination. And without any further ado, let's get started into the tutorial. So the very first step, of course, is to open Lens Studio, and I'm currently working on version 5.15. And here what we want to do is we want to build for Snapchat and click on this button here and just go into a default project. And click on accept and close this one off. And here we are in our project view. And on the right side, we do have here the simulator. If you are not seeing this kind of room that you can navigate with the WASD and your mouse, or do a right mouse click, then make sure that here on the top, click on this button here. And here you can choose in between different rooms. So we can also take the sunlit room, for example. It's a bit more friendly, but as we're placing scary flesh-eating plants, maybe the evening setting is a lot more fitting. So then on the left side, we do have our scene hierarchy and our assets. And the very first thing that we want to do is we want to go to the asset library and we want to enter world mesh. And then we want to scroll down to spawn object at world mesh on tab. And luckily we do have all these assets here. And if you're interested, then you can do some further search and investigation here, because you can just save a lot of time by just importing these assets. So just click here on import. And now if we go back into the editor and move, we can see that something is happening, but it's looking quite weird. There are these weird spinning axes which are supposed to visualize the mesh. And the reason that it's not working the way it should is that we need to go onto our camera object and we actually need to add world tracking here. So for that, we want to go to add component and we want to go to tracking. And then we're going to click on device tracking. And we want to set the tracking mode to world. And so we do now have a mesh that is kind of representing the real world geometry that will allow us to place something. And now if we tap, still nothing happens. And this is because we need to go into this prefab that has been put into our scene here while we imported the asset. And we need to still drag in the camera object. And so now if we move around and tap, we can see that objects are appearing on the mesh exactly at our tap position, which is pretty great. However, we need to still change two things. And the first one is we don't want these spinning axes here. We actually want to have some nice shadows that make the scene even more realistic. And we also need to replace these light bulbs or anchors or whatever you want to call them with a 3D object of our choice. So first of all, let's begin by swapping out the 3D object. So for that, we want to go to Sketchfab, and here we do have a wide variety of 3D objects that can be downloaded, many for free. So all we need to do is search for 3D models, and I'm going to search for a plant here, for example, and then I'm going to toggle downloadable, and I'm also going to make sure that the date is set to all time. And then if we search for a little bit, we can find actually another monster plant. This is quite cool. I haven't seen that one when I was searching for the first one, and this is even animated. So this is even cooler than the first one. So then if we try to download this, we need to take a look at the size of the object. So this one here is 3 megabytes, which is already on the larger side. I think the whole effect for Snapchat can be a maximum 5, or maybe it was 8 megabytes, I'm not quite sure. But as we only need this object here, I think we're still good. So let's then download the GLB file here with the texture size of 1K. Again, if you're scouting for your own 3D models, I wouldn't go over 3, maybe at the very maximum 4 megabytes, but this is already quite big. So just download the file. And let's make sure that we grab the downloaded file and drag it into Lens Studio. And here we just want to make sure that all of these fields are checked. And just click on accept. So then on the monster plant here, let's do a right click and let's go and click on unpack for editing. Now we have a nice folder here with animations, materials, meshes, textures, and a monster plant. So if we now double click on that, we are essentially in the prefab view, and we can see this is pretty large, a lot larger than what we wanted to. So then what we can do is we can click on the scale here and just decrease the scale, for example, to 5. And then what we also want to do already here is within the hierarchy is to find our actual mesh objects. And here we have the blue one. So this is object 9 and this one. And we want to make sure that we set the mesh shadow mode to caster, because later on we want to essentially cast shadows. And these are all used for the animations, so we can ignore those. And then also make sure that we click on apply for the prefab. So then back in our main scene, let's click on the spawn object at world mesh on tab. And let's drag in our monster plant here. And let's take a look. If we click, we can see that it is placing, but it's still way too big. So what we can do here is actually drag our monster plant into our scene. And we can see that for some reason the scale here is still set to 100. So let's go ahead and set the scale to 1. And make sure how that will actually look in our scene. So we do see that scale to 1 is a lot better. But maybe we want to rather set this one to actually 0.5. So this would be better, or maybe even 0.3. All right. So then let's do a right click here on the monster plant and save that as a prefab. And then just go ahead and delete it. And then once again, drag the new prefab we just created into our spawn object at world mesh on tab. And so now if we go ahead and click, we can see that the plants are actually here and moving around. So this is already pretty cool. There seems to be something off with the animation, so let's check that next. If we double click on our monster plant prefab here and go into the sketchfab scene, we can see that here we do have the different animations. And I guess the problem it might be that the begin and end frame is maybe set off here a little bit. So let's try to just set that to 100. And we can see that actually the end is at 29.5. So these are kind of the frames that we have, which is about 1 second. And let's hit apply. I think we just need to reload this scene and then place it. And yes, we can see that this is actually working a lot better. And we now have the animation working as it should be. So now finally, let's make sure to add a shadow catcher to our meshing. And for that, all we need to do is go into the asset browser and enter matte shadow, like that. And then we need to go into a world mesh visualization, and we're just gonna remove the occluder and world mesh visualization material. I'm gonna drag on the matte shadow onto the render mesh visual. Then we need to make sure that we click apply, and within the lighting, make sure that we activate the shadows. Then also make sure in the world mesh visualization to put the mesh shadow mode to receiver. And now if we place an object, we can see that there's a nice shadow happening. Always make sure to hit apply here. All right, now we got the effect working as it should be, which is pretty amazing. And to test it out on device, we can just click on preview lens, and you might need to scan a QR code with your phone the first time that you are trying this out, but then it should work flawlessly and you should be able to test this out on device. All right, but that's it for this tutorial. Congratulations, you just created your first simple 3D placement filter for Snapchat, and you can now try it out and show it to your friends and maybe create an even more interactive and fun experience out of this prototype. So I hope you found it useful. Let me know if you have any questions in the comments below, but until then, as always, thanks a lot for watching and see you next time.